Souvenir et témoigner. We are here to acknowledge the huge gratitude we owe to our dear veterans. In World War II, the universal language of gratitude to the liberating Allied troops was one word: bravo. Let that be our language today. For the supreme sacrifice that so many beloved Canadians made and were ready to make on land, in the air, at sea, the dead, the wounded, the survivors, the war-bereaved, men and women, Anglophones, Francophones, natives, members of many ethnic and religious communities, we say together, bravo, for putting their lives on hold and at risk in order to eliminate tyranny and defend liberty. Younger veterans and older veterans who meet today in mutual respect and admiration as partners in the battle against evil, we say together, bravo, for fighting our fight to assure freedom and dignity for everyone, deserving to be celebrated, applauded, and eternally appreciated as the authentic heroes. We say, bravo, for their bravery, their dignity, their selflessness, their embrace of Canada, their devotion to global freedom that defines them. We say, bravo. May those who died be remembered lovingly. May those who were injured be healed in body and spirit. May those who served and continue to serve live out their lives in a world that is free of terror and suffused with tranquility. The type of world they fought to create and preserve, and for which we say, bravo. To remember is to be grateful. To be grateful is to give thanks. How do we say thank you to our veterans? By embracing them, by hugging them, by expressing our appreciation to any and every veteran we meet, in all places and at all times, by teaching our children how much in their debt we are and always will be, and by exclaiming in unison for them to hear, bravo. Let us continue to make Canada worthy of their dedication and sacrifice, a country in which respect, harmony, inclusion, responsibility, and kindness fill the air, a country which reflects the profundity of our saying together, bravo. May our profound embrace of remembrance and gratitude be a crowning glory for our veterans and our country. Amen.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, God save the Queen. Mesdames et messieurs, Dieu protège la reine. Ladies and gentlemen, the march past will soon commence. and our veterans will lead the parade, followed by the Royal Military College of Canada, the members of the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Air Force, HMCS Carleton, the Governor-General's Foot Guards, the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, cadets from the Navy, Army, Air Cadet organizations, along with the Junior Canadian Rangers and the Navy League Cadets of Canada, as well as the 30th Field Regiment Royal Canadian Artillery. Mesdames et messieurs, le défilé, les anciens combattants à la tête, débutera sous peu, suivi de le Collège militaire royal du Canada, membres de la Marine royale du Canada, l'Armée canadienne et l'Aviation royale du Canada, le NCSM Carleton, le Gouverneur General's Foot Guards, le Cameron Highlanders d'Ottawa, la Gendarmerie royale du Canada, les cadets de la Marine, de l'Armée, cadets de l'air avec les Rangers juniors canadiens et les cadets de la Ligue navale du Canada, et bien sûr le 30e régiment de campagne Artillerie royale du Canada. We would ask those wishing to place a wreath at the National Memorial or a poppy on the tomb of the unknown soldier to please wait until directed to do so, and the site will be open.
Now this next phase of this ceremony honestly stirs the soul if it hasn't been stirred enough already. The parade that will move past the Prime Minister and the Governor General. Again, this is one of the things I love about the Governor General. He does have those very personal conversations with anyone who walks up, but particularly on this day.
He's an incredible individual, an incredible Governor General, and an incredible representative of our country. And I think people take to him automatically. He's just such an incredible individual. And it's a great experience when you're marching past. Your Governor General, your Commander-in-Chief is there, the Prime Minister, our elected leader is there, and other leaders of our nation. Very moving. And
the Silver Cross Mother also has a very prestigious position on the dais as the Governor General and the Prime Minister greet the parades, military, diplomatic corps. Craig, you've been out on the street. You've been here in the studio. It's a snowy day out there today. But honestly, I was overwhelmed this morning how early people started arriving at the memorial.
Well, the crowds have been increasing by 5, 7, 8% a year at the ceremonies. But in between Remembrance Days, the other thing that's happening is a tremendous outpouring of interest in our wars. The War Museum has had thousands of hits to people wanting to know about relatives they may have had. Pictures, you can look up pictures of the tombstones of First World War dead lying in France. It's just been a tremendous outpouring of, to use Rick's word, appreciation for the self-sacrifice that so many people gave.
That's the key. It's the self-sacrifice. And there, as I said, the Governor General making his way through the crowd. Mercedes, you're out there. What's the feeling now in the crowd?
Hi, how are you doing? Good to hear. How are you?
Draw themselves up, some of them in their 80s and 90s. When they hear that call to salute, they become young men again. And I'm here with someone who has been deeply affected by Canada's sacrifice in Afghanistan, Natasha Roberge. Natasha, your father was killed in Afghanistan. Can you tell us a bit about him?
My father was 45 when he was killed, and he was a big teddy bear. I know the Army guys, they have a stigma to keep, but with his family, he's very, very lovable and very sweet.
And your father was Warrant Officer Roberge. You said that you came here today and you're looking around at this crowd. What strikes you as all of these people remember your family and your father's sacrifice?
What strikes me the most is the turnout. Obviously, there's so many people here, and it's nice to see the support for the troops. But what strikes me the most is that most of the people here weren't even born in Canada. And I think that's really special that you come, that we accept people into our country and they support our troops anyways.
You're also the winner of a scholarship from the Hero Fund that supports the children of fallen soldiers. What does it mean to have people coming forward and making sure that you feel taken care of? And if you can tell us a bit about what you're studying with your scholarship.
Well, I'm currently at the Faculty of Education at the University of Ottawa. It's a very intensive one-year program, so the scholarship really permitted me to concentrate on my studies and not worry about financial problems. So.
And what do you want people to know today on Remembrance Day, as you remember your father, about the sacrifices, not just of the soldiers, but of their families as well?
I think I want people to educate their kids and let them know that it's still happening and that's not just World War I and World War II anymore. It really hits home. Like, when I become a teacher, I'm really gonna drive it home to the kids.
Natasha, thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate your father's service. Lisa, back to you.
Wise words from Natasha Mercedes. Thank you for bringing her story to us. And General Warrant Officer Roberge, killed from Sudbury, killed in 2008.
He was an incredible individual, and as Natasha mentioned, he was known as the teddy bear. Big, physically imposing guy, but with a manner that was absolutely incredible. His soldiers loved him, and when I went back into Afghanistan for the first time after he had been killed, I was out with his company, and every one of the company fighting vehicles had a little teddy bear stuck into it somewhere as a little...
I was going to say that it's interesting to me to hear Natasha talk about new Canadians honoring the people who have fought in our armed forces, because I also found, after The Stone Carvers was published, that newer Canadians were writing me letters and visiting the Vimy Memorial as a result of reading the book. And for me, that was one of the most moving and important parts, was the fact that through the narrative, as I say, newer Canadians were actually making the trip to see the memorial and to understand the history.
And new Canadians and new traditions emerging every year. And this, I love this new tradition. Well, a few years now, I guess. People just spontaneously put their poppy on the tomb of the unknown soldier. And, you know, as people sort of file out of the square, they leave their poppy there. I've always thought that was just a beautiful tradition. And these things, it's interesting, Craig, how they just emerge over time.
Like the Highway of Heroes, like the ramp ceremonies. And even an hour or 2 hours after this ceremony is over, there will still be a big crowd around the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It's hard to get there. I tried last year. It's hard to get in there with your poppy to put it in place.
You know, I just think we all have to be really aware now that there are still 620 Canadian forces on the ground right now in Afghanistan helping to train Afghan army and police so they can take control of their own country and their own security. And today, they too paused to remember with a ceremony in Kabul. So we had an opportunity. There is the Kabul ceremony this morning. Lieutenant General Stuart Beer is commander of Canadian Joint Operations Command. He joins me now from Kabul. General, first of all, your training, and I can hear the choppers overhead right now, but your training mission is winding down there. Give me a sense of your confidence level that the Afghans can handle their own security at this point.
Lisa, the Afghans have been providing for the security of the citizens of Afghanistan in the majority for months, if not years. And in the city of Kabul, but they've been actually leading on the security of this city for a number of years without international security forces in the street. So they've been doing it for a number of months, countrywide, and a number of years in the city itself.
Well, let's talk about that, because you know, I've certainly been with trainers at different times over the years, and there was always been that sense that Afghans would, depending on who had the best offer, would switch teams, if you will. So to the Taliban or NATO forces or government. So in your sense, do you think that you are winning
Lisa, the real evidence is the behavior of the Afghans themselves. And, you know, if you come here and you see it for yourself and you're able to march side by side with Afghans, the soldiers and the police officers in the street and their leadership in operations and increasingly their leadership in the institutions, they've already voted for the future that they want, and they've been sacrificing for months and years to deliver on that future.
In your opinion, what is Canada's Afghan legacy?
We have provided safety and security to Afghan peoples in the province of Kandahar in particular. We have contributed hugely to the development of the Afghan security forces' capacity to operate on their own and sustain themselves in the years to come. The stories are endless. What we've learned as a military profession is huge, and how Canada and Canadians have come together, wrapping their arms around their military through these 13 tough years has been priceless.
We have learned a lot and we've lost a lot in these tough years, as you say. 158 men and women. Canada is still there, still in the fight.
Today we remember all wars, and today we're standing shoulder to shoulder with partners, international partners here in Afghanistan, and as military men and women representing our country, remembering all sacrifices together.
But for you personally, what does this Remembrance Day mean?
It is boy, Lisa, that's a gooder. This is an incredibly moving day. I've served here. I've visited here so many times, visiting those who have served here. I've seen the sacrifices that we've made here and at the home front, and I've seen the progress that's been achieved. And I got to tell you, for me, today validates 13 years of incredible contribution by Canadians and our partners, including Afghans themselves, in creating a better Afghanistan.
We all hope for that, and we are standing there here in Ottawa. Thank you so much, General, for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa. Have a memorable Remembrance Day.
We will indeed.
We remember them.
And we all do. You know, he made a really good point there, General Hillier, referencing the fact 13 years Canada has been in Afghanistan. March 2014, that's it. We're back.
Lisa, 13 years, more than 40,000 of Canada's sons and daughters, representing probably 500,000 family members, have served in Afghanistan, have contributed, sacrificed, done what we as a nation have asked them to do. It's winding down. And so how we're going to come to closure with that, how we are going to mark that 13 years and tens of thousands of people is yet to be answered. And I think we really need to come to grips as a nation with what we're going to do to mark that mission, mark that sacrifice and service. And we need to do that relatively soon, because I think in early spring of 2014 will be an absolute and appropriate time to do something on a national basis to mark that mission in Afghanistan.
And I think, Jane, if you can give us a historic perspective on over time how have Canadian troops after World War I, after World War II, after the Korean War being commemorated here in the nation's capital.
I think it's very appropriate that that should happen after the wind-up of the war in Afghanistan. I think that it's absolutely essential, because although apart from everything else, these young people will be leaving behind a whole world. They will be moving into the civilian world, and we need to welcome them back.
Bob Fife, you're in the at the memorial there. Give me a sense, if you can, what preparations may be underway in order to truly fet the end of this mission when the last troops come out of Afghanistan in March 2014.
The government is looking at special medals and honors for the regiments who fought in Afghanistan. There's a number of options that they have on the table. We expect they will announce that fairly shortly. We've done that in a number of our battles, right beginning from the Boer War, actually, where we recognized and provided specific medals for some of the wars that we fought, and I know the government is looking very seriously at that. And I want to just say, Lisa, because you have General Hillier there with you, you know, we had impressive leadership in Afghanistan. You and I both been over and watched our young men and women who were part of the battles and fighting in Afghanistan, and General Hillier was one of the commanders who led them for a long period of time, and he always insisted that the soldiers have the best equipment possible, because he wanted to make sure that there were no lives lost. And one of the things I was always impressed about General Hillier when I went there with the Prime Minister, that he didn't shine the Prime Minister's shoes. He wasn't hanging around with the Prime Minister all the time. What he was doing was meeting with the soldiers. I would always look for him, and he was never with the Prime Minister. He was actually talking to the soldiers, finding out from them what they needed, how things were going for them out on the battlefield. And he didn't just talk the talk. He went out with them and slept with them on the ground, including with the JDF-2, our special forces. So I just want to say this, that we have an opportunity that General Hillier was an outstanding leader, leading some outstanding men and women.
You've got him blushing in here in the studio, Bob. Very true, though, General Hillier, you were always very well loved by the troops any time I was there, including the time I think the Stanley Cup rolled through Kandahar Airfield Base. But, you know, your memories of that time, I mean, that was one of, for this generation, we'd never lived through a television war before. Certainly for reporters like myself, in and out of Afghanistan over that 6-year time period, it really did feel like we needed to learn firsthand from generals like yourself exactly where we were going, and it was a mission that seems, even to this day, difficult to define whether we're winning or losing.
Well, Lisa, whether we're winning or losing, I think it was still a defining moment for our nation, and in many cases for the Western world. Here we were in combat operations, trying to do what we perceived as was right as a nation in this much changed world since the end of the Cold War, which is unstable and insecure, and our sons and daughters were paying an incredible price for that. Bob, I thank you for the comments, and Lisa, I thank you, but I was just doing what I perceived as my job. If I didn't look after those young men and women, our sons and daughters, then who was going to?
In fact, you're still not shining the Prime Minister's shoes in the fact that on this very broadcast, you've demanded from a very high position a change to that Veterans Charter.
He said there are two things that the veterans and those soldiers now have near and dear to their heart. Number one is the Veterans Charter is not right. Number two is they want to remain as soldiers. And we need to find a way to keep those who want to stay as soldiers, even if they've taken a bullet or a bomb for our nation. And even if they cannot do all of the jobs perfectly, we need to find a way to keep them as soldiers because they want to stay. Those two things would change the dynamic for our veterans in a way that's quite incredible.
You've had an opportunity, Jane, through a lot of your research and going to the Royal College, Military College in Kingston. Give me your sense then of sort of this moving forward and doing right by the troops.
Well, I think one of the things that's important to understand is that it's easy for civilians to have a stereotypical notion of what a military person is, and visiting the Royal Military College blew that completely apart for me. I was astonished. I mean, there were people there who were writing poetry, there were musicians. These are extremely multifaceted individuals who have talents in all kinds of areas, and so therefore they are people who are going to be, you know, of great value to society at large. In any number of different ways, but the military operates in so many different ways. I mean, they don't just fight wars. There's all kinds of wonderful and important things that they do as well as that, and I think that's something that we have to remember.
And what we have the minister now with Bob Fife at the Cenotaph. Bob, we're having a bit of a political conversation here, so you fit right in.
Well, I'm here with the Veterans Affairs Minister, Julian Fantino. And Mr. Fantino, a lot of people have been talking in recent days, actually a lot longer than that, about the Veterans Charter and the feeling that we aren't treating our generation from fought in Afghanistan very well, and that there needs to be significant changes to the Veterans Charter.
Well, we're certainly open to making reasonable changes that can be made. The Charter was a living document, is a living document, if you will. There's been many changes over the years since it came in back in 2006. So to that end, we're going to be doing a complete review, a comprehensive review, and we'll see what adjustments can be made. And we're certainly going to be looking at it with the intent to address some of the gaps and some of the issues that have surfaced.
I mean, the Veterans Ombudsman has pointed out that there could be 400 veterans who will end up in poverty because of inadequate pensions. 53% of veterans who have been totally incapacitated are not getting the benefits that they're entitled to. So some of this is doing with the charter, but some it seems to be with just a lack of compassion, perhaps, inside the veterans bureaucracy.
Well, the compassion is there. I've been traveling the country talking to veterans and talking to veterans representatives, the various stakeholders, and yes, there are issues. I mean, it's a work in progress. There's always the goodwill and the intent, as there always has been, to pay respect and homage to our veterans. And clearly, our intent is to continue working. We value the work that was done by the Ombudsman. But certainly, we also have to say that we've tried and we are committed to continuing the good work to support our veterans. And to that end, we'll do what we can to continue that process.
All right, we'll keep our eye on the minister to make sure he follows through on the Veterans Charter. Back to you, Lisa.
Okay, Bob. So there you go. You've just heard it. They're addressing the gaps in a complete review. Thanks for that, Bob. Now, of course, our national emblem for Remembrance Day, the poppy, was inspired by a poem written by a Canadian doctor who served in the First World War, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. John McCrae, author of In Flanders Fields. The words are penned and are still meaningful today. The poem has been quoted at length, even put to a song, as you heard earlier, by the Ottawa Children's Choir. Since Dr. McCrae's death, just 3 years after writing In Flanders Fields, his descendants have protected and honored his legacy. Take a look.
My name is John McCrae Kilgore. It's an honor to be named after my great-great-uncle, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. John Alexander McCrae, the author of the poem In Flanders Fields. He wrote the poem amidst the guns of the First World War, shortly after burying one of his close friends. The poem is a lasting legacy of how terrible the battles of that war were, and a testament to the horrors of war in general. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
So powerful. And of course, Craig, once mandatory to actually know that poem for school kids by heart.
When I was in elementary school, most of my teachers were First War vets. They had served in the trenches. And we had to memorize at Remembrance Day the words to that wonderful poem. And I wrote slightly off-color, vulgar verses to the poem. I was 9 years old, perhaps, and it went through the school. Kids were tittering, and finally got to the principal's office, and I was taken in to be disciplined, get the strap. And as the principal strapped me, he started to cry, tears coming down his face. And I know what he was thinking. He was thinking, this generation, his generation, will never appreciate what my comrades and I sacrificed. Well, I want, Mr. Wilson to know that I do appreciate it.
I was going to say something here, and that is that the poetry of the First World War was hugely important. There were poets like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, about whom it has been said, especially in terms of Wilfred Owen, that the entire progress of literature would have been changed had he lived. He wrote the Anthem for Doomed Youth and various other poems. But it's the literature that has come out of war has been terribly important, I think.
And we have your literature also now to carry it forward. And your final thoughts this morning, General?
I simply had to what Jane said about leaders out of Royal Military College. We produce leaders of the nation, not just soldiers and sailors and airmen and airwomen. God bless every Canadian who came out today or wore a poppy. Next year, do it again and bring somebody with you, or get somebody to wear a poppy who didn't do it this year. Let's continue to remember, commemorate, and appreciate. God bless them.
And again, this is just the largest in the country, certainly at the National War Memorial, but this is the image right across Canada today at small cenotaphs. It's been a great privilege for all of us for this coverage. Craig, I want to thank you for your very personal story. You got us all choked up here, and I'm sure so many people with similar tales. This concludes our live coverage of the National Remembrance Day ceremony, and if you'd like to watch any part of